Poor boy asks famous musician to teach him guitar. What he did was amazing. Timothy Walker had been hiding in the main square of Nashville for 3 weeks, watching every move of the man he considered his hero. The famous guitarist had come to town for a series of performances, but what really caught the 12-year-old boy's attention was the passion with which the musician played during his morning rehearsals. It was on a Tuesday morning that Timothy finally gathered the courage to approach. Wearing a worn-out shirt and patched flip-flops, the boy slowly walked over to where Michael Harrison was tuning his guitar under an ancient tree. "Mr. Harrison," the boy's voice trembled. The musician looked up, seeing for the first time the thin face that had been watching him for days. Michael was 52, with graying hair slicked back and hands calloused from decades of playing. His expression was stern, almost scowling. "What do you want, kid?" I wanted you to teach me how to play guitar," Timothy blurted out quickly, as if he'd memorized the line. Michael let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Get out of here, boy. I don't have time for games." "It's not a game, sir," Timothy insisted, his eyes shining with determination. "I can play a little." "You can play?" Michael arched an eyebrow, amused. "And where's your guitar?" The boy ran to a nearby bench and returned carrying something that made the musician stop laughing instantly. It was a shoebox with stretched rubber bands, mimicking the strings of a guitar. Small pieces of wood served as makeshift frets. "My dad made this for me before he left," Timothy explained, positioning his fingers over the rubber bands. "He said one day I'd have a real guitar." Michael watched silently as the boy plucked his handmade creation, producing sounds that, though out of tune, followed a recognizable melody. It was a simplified version of Country Roads, but there was something in the performance that struck a chord in the musician's heart. "Who taught you that?" "No one," Timothy replied simply. "I listened to songs on Mrs. Wilson's radio and tried to play them." Michael Harrison had become famous precisely for his flawless technique and precise interpretations. He was nationally recognized as one of the best guitarists in the southern region, but it had been years since he'd felt the genuine emotion he'd just witnessed. "What's your name?" "Timothy Walker, sir, but everyone calls me Timmy." "And where do you live, Timmy?" The boy pointed beyond the square, where the edge of a modest housing complex could be seen. "In Lincoln Heights, with my mom and grandma." Michael fell silent for a few seconds, studying the hopeful look on the boy's face. There was something in those eyes that unsettled and fascinated him at the same time. "All right," he finally said. "One lesson, just one. Tomorrow at 7 in the morning, right here." The smile that spread across Timothy's face was so radiant that Michael felt a pang in his chest. It had been a long time since he'd seen someone so happy over something so simple. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'll never forget this." The boy carefully tucked away his shoebox and ran off, leaving the musician alone with his thoughts. Michael resumed playing, but his melodies no longer sounded the same. There was something different in the air, an anticipation he hadn't felt in decades. The next morning, Timothy arrived half an hour early. Michael found him sitting on the bench, practicing on his shoebox with a focus impressive for a child. "You're early," the musician observed. "I couldn't sleep much," Timothy admitted. "I kept thinking about the lesson all night." Michael sat down beside the boy and picked up his professional guitar, an instrument that cost more than many families made in a year. "Before we begin, I want to know something. Why do you want to play guitar?" Timothy thought for a moment before answering. "When my father played," my mother smiled. "After he left, she never really smiled again. I think if I could play like him, maybe she'd be happy again." The answer hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He himself had started playing for similar reasons, trying to bring joy to a house marked by sadness. But that was a long time ago, before fame, contracts, obligations. "All right," he said, adjusting the guitar strings. "Let's start with the basics." The first lesson was eye-opening. Timothy not only absorbed every instruction with impressive ease, but also showed a natural musical ear. When Michael played a note, the boy could identify it and reproduce it on his shoebox with precision. "How do you do that?" Michael asked, intrigued. "Do what?" know exactly which note I played. Timothy shrugged. I can't explain it. I just know. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. Michael finished the lesson with a strange feeling. There was something special about that boy, a raw talent rarely seen. But there was also responsibility in it, and Michael Harrison wasn't used to responsibilities that didn't involve his career. Tomorrow, same time, he said, surprising himself. Really? Timothy's eyes lit up. Really? Over the following days, a routine settled in. Timothy arrived promptly at 7 in the morning, and Michael taught basic techniques that the boy picked up with astonishing ease. But it was during the 4th lesson that something unexpected happened. Mr. Harrison, Timothy said shyly, I made up a song. Do you want to hear it? Michael nodded, expecting a simple child's melody. What he heard was completely different. Timothy began playing an original composition on his shoebox that, despite the limited sounds of the improvised instrument, had a complex and moving melodic structure. The song spoke of longing, of hope, of a boy who dreamed of flying like the birds he saw in the morning. Even with the instrument's limitations, the melody touched Michael deeply. Where did you learn to compose? I didn't learn, Timothy replied. The songs come into my head and I just put the pieces together. Michael was silent for a long time. This wasn't just natural talent. It was something rare, special. The boy had a gift many professional musicians would never develop. Timmy, would you like to play a real guitar? The boy's eyes widened. Can I? Michael handed his professional guitar to the small, eager hands. Timothy held it with the care of someone handling something sacred, placing his fingers on the real strings for the first time in his life. What happened next left Michael speechless. Timothy began playing the same composition he'd performed on the shoebox, but now with the rich sound of a quality instrument. The melody came alive, full of expression and emotion. It was as if the boy had been playing guitar his whole life. That's impossible, Michael murmured. But it wasn't impossible. It was real, happening right before his eyes. Timothy not only played with surprising technique for a beginner, but also interpreted the music with an emotional maturity that bordered on the supernatural. Is it okay, Mr. Harrison? Timothy asked, noticing the musician's stunned expression. It's perfect, son. It's perfect. That afternoon, Michael cancelled an appointment for the first time in years. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. Timothy Walker wasn't just a talented child. He was a musical prodigy, possibly the greatest raw talent Michael had ever encountered. But there was a problem. Michael was in Nashville only temporarily. In 2 weeks, he'd need to return to New York City, where he had contracts, recordings, and a career to maintain. What should he do about Timothy? That question haunted him all night. For the first time in a long while, Michael Harrison couldn't sleep thinking about music. He was thinking about responsibility, wasted potential, and a boy who deserved so much more than life could offer. The next morning, Timothy arrived as usual, punctual and cheerful. But this time he brought something different along with his shoebox. I brought something to show you, he said, pulling a crumpled school notebook from his backpack. Michael opened the notebook and felt his jaw drop. The pages were filled with musical sketches, improvised scores Timothy had created using his own notation. It wasn't traditional sheet music, but it had perfect internal logic. The boy had invented his own system for writing down his compositions. Did you do all this? I did, Timothy confirmed proudly. I made up 10 new songs since school started. Michael flipped through the notebook, each page revealing more surprises. Timothy didn't just compose melodies, he created variations, thematic developments, and complex structures many professional composers would find challenging. Timmy, I need to ask you something important. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a musician like you, came the answer without hesitation. I want to play on TV and make my mom smile for real. Michael felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. He had discovered a rough diamond, but didn't know if he had the right or the ability to polish it. What about your mom? How does she feel about you wanting to be a musician? Timothy lowered his eyes, nervously fidgeting with the shoebox. She doesn't know I come here. She says music doesn't give poor folks a future. Why does she think that? Because of my dad. He was a musician and left to try his luck in the big city, never came back. The revelation explained a lot. Timothy's mother associated music with abandonment, with impossible dreams that took people away. It was an understandable view, but one that could destroy the exceptional future the boy had ahead of him. Do you want me to talk to her? Timothy shook his head vigorously. No, sir. She'd get mad and wouldn't let me come here anymore. Michael was torn. As a professional, he knew Timothy needed formal music education, proper instruments, and opportunities only a family could provide. But as a human being, he understood the fear of a mother who had already lost her husband to music. Timmy, I'll make you an offer. How about I buy you a guitar? The boy's eyes lit up, but then dimmed. My mom wouldn't take it. She says we don't accept charity from anyone. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was a loan? Timothy thought for a moment. How's that work? You could pay it back by returning the guitar when you don't need it anymore, or when you can afford your own. The offer made sense, but Timothy still seemed hesitant. Let me think about it, Mr. Harrison. During that day's lesson, Michael noticed Timothy was more introspective. The boy played with the same precision as always, but there was a melancholy in his performance that hadn't been there before. What's bothering you? I keep thinking, what if my mum's right? What if music really isn't for folks like me? Michael stopped playing immediately. Look at me, Timmy. The boy raised his eyes. Talent doesn't choose social class. Music doesn't belong only to the rich. What you have is special, and it would be a sin to waste it out of fear. But what if I end up like my father? What if I abandon everyone? Then that will be your choice, not music's. Music doesn't force anyone to do anything. It just gives us a different language to speak to the world. Michael's words seemed to calm Timothy, who started playing again with more confidence. But the professional musician knew the boy's insecurities ran deep and were justified. It would take much more than words to convince him that talent was a gift, not a curse. That afternoon, Michael did something he hadn't done in years. He walked the streets of Nashville without a specific destination. He wanted to better understand the city that had revealed such extraordinary talent, to grasp the context in which Timothy lived. The housing complex where the boy lived was about a 15-minute walk from the town square. It was a simple but tidy neighborhood where people greeted each other on the street and children played freely in the yards. Michael didn't seek out Timothy's house but observed the dynamics of the place from a distance. It was a tight-knit community where everyone knew and helped one another. That explained the boy's sense of responsibility and his fear of disappointing his family. On his way back, Michael passed by a music store. The display window showcased guitars of all prices, from basic models to expensive professional instruments. He went in and began examining the options. "Can I help you?" asked the clerk, recognizing the famous musician. "I'm looking for a guitar for a young beginner, something of good quality but not too expensive." "We have some excellent options." The clerk showed him several models. "This one here is perfect for someone just starting out. Good sound, easy to play." Michael tested the instrument and approved its quality. It was simple but had the potential to properly nurture Timothy's talent. "I'll take this one." "You're going to make a young man very happy," the clerk remarked. "It's always exciting to see someone starting out in music." More exciting than you know, Michael thought. The next morning, Timothy arrived at the square and immediately noticed the guitar case leaning against the tree. "Is this for me?" he asked, hardly believing it. "It's yours to borrow," Michael confirmed. "Remember what we talked about?" Timothy opened the case with trembling hands. The guitar wasn't the most expensive in the world, but to him, it was perfect. The strings gleamed in the morning sun, the varnish highlighted the light wood, and the sound it made when he played the first note was pure and clear. "It's the most beautiful thing in the world," Timothy murmured, stroking the instrument. "Now you can practice at home," Michael said, "but you'll have to be discreet, at least at first." "I'll take care of it like it's my own child," Timothy promised solemnly. From that day on, The lessons took on a new dimension. Timothy arrived with new discoveries, melodies he had practiced at home, technical questions that arose during practice. His progress was exponential. Michael began teaching basic music theory, but soon realized Timothy grasped complex concepts with ease. In 2 weeks, the boy mastered chords that some students took months to learn. "How do you learn so fast?" "I can't explain it," Timothy replied, focused on a complex harmonic sequence. "It's like I already knew, and you're just reminding me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, it was the closest answer to the truth. Timothy had an instinctive talent that went beyond formal education. He felt music in a way few could, as if he spoke a native musical language. But the days were passing, and Michael knew he would soon have to leave. The 2-week deadline was almost up, and he still hadn't decided what to do about Timothy. Then something unexpected happened. They were in the middle of a lesson when a woman approached the tree where they usually met. She was a lady in her 40s, her face tired but determined, dressed in simple but clean clothes. "Timothy Walker." Her voice cut through the morning air. The boy froze, the guitar still in his hands. "Mom, I knew you were hiding something," she said, walking toward them. "Mrs. Wilson told me she saw you here every morning." Michael stood up, extending his hand. "You must be Timmy's mother. I'm Michael Harrison." The woman didn't accept the greeting. "I know who you are, and I know what you're doing with my son." "Mom, he's just teaching me." "Shut your mouth, Timothy," she snapped. "Go home right now. We'll talk later." "Ma'am," Michael tried to intervene. "And you don't speak to me?" She turned to him, eyes flashing. "What right do you have to fill my son's head with fantasies?" "They're not fantasies. Your son has exceptional talent." "Talent?" She laughed bitterly. "His father had talent too. You know where that got him? Away from his family, to abandonment, to ruin." Timothy stood between the two adults, holding the guitar like a shield. "My dad's coming back, Mum. He promised." "Your father isn't coming back, Timothy." The words came out harsher than she intended. "He chose music over us, and I won't let the same thing happen to you." The woman took the guitar from her son's hands. "This is going back where it came from. And you," she pointed at Michael, "stop filling my son's head with nonsense. People like us don't become famous musicians. Our lives are about work, school, and being decent folks." "But Mom..." "No buts, Timothy. It's over. I don't want you near this man ever again." She took her son's hand and started walking away. Timothy looked back, his eyes full of tears. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison." Michael stood alone in the square, watching mother and son disappear. The guitar he'd bought for Timothy leaned against the tree, abandoned like a broken dream. For the first time in many years, Michael Harrison felt completely lost. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus on anything. He cancelled appointments, wandered the city, trying to make sense of what had happened. Timothy's mother's reaction was understandable, but seeing the boy's dream crushed like that was too painful. That night, alone in his hotel room, Michael made a decision. He couldn't give up on Timothy like this. The boy's talent was too real, too special to be wasted on fear and misunderstanding. The next morning, armed with the address he got from some neighbors, Michael knocked on Timothy's door. An older woman answered, her hair gray and her smile kind. "You must be the musician," she said. "I'm Margaret, Linda's mother and Timmy's grandmother. May I speak with you?" "Of course, come in, please." The house was small but tidy. The living room had just the basics: a simple couch, an old television, a few family photos on the walls. Margaret offered coffee and sat across from Michael. "Linda isn't here, she's at work, and Timmy's at school. I came to talk about him, about the talent he has." Margaret sighed. "I know my granddaughter is being harsh, but she has her reasons. Could you tell me why?" Margaret was silent for a moment, then stood and returned with an old photograph. "This is Robert, Timothy's father." The photo showed a smiling young man holding a guitar, embracing a much younger and happier Linda. He was a good boy, hard-working, affectionate, a present father. but he had this passion for music he couldn't control. What happened? An opportunity came up in New York City. A manager who said he had potential, that he could make it big. Robert was torn between leaving and staying. Linda was pregnant with Timothy at the time. Margaret paused, touching the photo. He promised it would only be temporary, that he'd find success and come back rich to get his family. Timothy was just 2 years old when he left. And he never came back? He sent letters at first, a few calls, then nothing. We heard through others that he didn't achieve the success he dreamed of. Seems he went back to his hometown in rural Tennessee, started another family. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. The story perfectly explained Linda's fear. But that doesn't mean every musician will abandon their family. I know, Margaret agreed. But for Linda, music means abandonment. She works double shifts to support the boy and still pays for night school. She's afraid Timothy will inherit his father's instability. And you? What do you think? Margaret looked out the window where other children could be seen playing in the street. I think talent is a gift from God, and wasting such a gift is a sin. So you'd help me convince your daughter? I would if you promised me one thing. Anything. That you won't fill the boy's head with unrealistic expectations, that you won't feed him promises of fame and success. Timothy is a good kid, responsible. I don't want to see him chasing impossible dreams. Michael thought carefully before answering. I can promise I'll teach him music for the love of music, not for fame or money. If he decides to pursue a professional career when he's older, that'll be his choice. My only responsibility is giving him the tools to choose wisely. Margaret smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Then we have a deal. But you'll need patience with Linda. She's stubborn once she's made up her mind. When Timothy came back from school, he found Michael having coffee with his grandmother. The boy's face lit up, but quickly darkened with worry. Mr. Harrison, what are you doing here? If my mum comes... Easy, son, Margaret intervened. I invited him to talk. Timmy, I want you to know something, Michael said. No matter what happens, you'll always be my student. Even if I have to leave, even if your mum doesn't accept the lessons, there'll always be a place for you in music. What do you mean? I mean your talent is real, it's special, and talents like that always find a way to bloom, no matter the obstacles. Timothy sat on the floor, leaning against his grandmother's leg. I just want to play, Grandma. Why does it have to be so complicated? Because the good things in life always are, my grandson. If it were easy, it wouldn't be worth much. The three fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. That's when they heard footsteps on the porch. Linda had come home from work. She stopped at the living room door, seeing Michael there. What is this man doing in my house? Linda, sit down, Margaret said firmly. We're going to talk like civilized people. I have nothing to say to him, Mom. Yes, you do. About your son's future. Linda stepped into the room, but stayed standing, arms crossed defensively. Linda, Michael began, I understand your fear. I get why you associate music with abandonment, but you need to understand your son has something special. Special how? Like his father? No, far beyond his father. Timothy has a talent I've never seen in 40 years of teaching. It's a gift that comes once in a generation. A gift, Linda laughed sarcastically. A gift for abandoning your family? A gift for chasing impossible dreams? A gift for bringing beauty into the world, Michael replied calmly. For touching people's hearts. For turning pain into art, loneliness into connection. Pretty words. But words don't pay bills, don't put food on the table, don't raise a child alone. Margaret stood up and walked over to her daughter. Linda, I raised you and your siblings alone after your father left. I know what struggle is. I know what sacrifice means. But I also know what it's like to see talent wasted. Mum, don't start. No, let me speak. Your brother David had a talent for painting, remember? He made beautiful pictures, but you convinced him to give it up, said art had no future. Now he works in a factory and hasn't touched a brush since. Linda lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the memory. It was what was best for him. Was it? Is David happy, Linda? Have you ever seen him truly happy since he stopped painting? Timothy watched the debate between the women in his family, understanding for the first time the weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just about him. It was about dreams, about fear, about the cost of giving up what makes us feel alive. "Linda," Michael said softly, "I don't want to take your son away. I don't want to turn him into something he's not. I just want to give him the chance to be who he really is." And who is he? A musician. Through and through, body and soul. Timothy breathes music, thinks music, dreams music. You can try to take that away from him, but you'd be taking away an essential part of who he is. Linda looked at her son, who watched her with pleading eyes. "Timmy, is this really what you want? Knowing you might end up like your father?" "Mom," Timothy stood up, walking toward her. "I don't want to abandon anyone. I just want to play. I want to make you smile like you did when Dad played." The mention of her husband made Linda's eyes fill with tears. "Your father used to say those things too. But I'm not my father. I'm me. And I promise I'll never leave you alone." Linda hugged her son, finally letting the tears fall. "I'm just scared, son. Scared you'll get hurt. Scared you'll leave and never come back." "I won't leave, Mom. My home is here, with you and Grandma." Michael watched the scene, moved. It had been a long time since he'd witnessed something so genuine, so pure. "Linda," he said, "how about a compromise? I'll teach Timothy music, but with conditions. He stays in school, keeps being a normal kid. Music will be a complement, not an obsession. And if at any point you think it's harming him, I'll stop immediately." Linda wiped her tears and stared at Michael for a long moment. "How do I know I can trust you?" "Because I was once a boy who dreamed of music too, and I know the difference between teaching with love and teaching with ambition." Margaret stepped closer to her daughter. "Give it a chance, Linda, for your son and for yourself." Linda took a deep breath. "All right, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, lessons happen here at home, where I can see. Second, Timothy keeps his grades up. If they start slipping, lessons stop. Third, no promises of fame or success. It's just for the love of music." Michael extended his hand. "I accept all your conditions." Linda shook his hand, but there was still hesitation in her eyes. "One more thing. If you ever leave, I don't want you disappearing from my son's life without a word. He's already suffered one abandonment. He can't handle another. I promise if I ever have to go, I'll prepare Timothy, and I'll never lose touch with him." Timothy, who had silently followed the whole negotiation, finally smiled. "So, I can really take lessons?" "You can," Linda confirmed, ruffling her son's hair. "But don't forget your homework." "Never, Mom. I promise." And so began a new chapter in all their lives. Michael changed his lodging to an inn near Timothy's house, rearranged his schedule to free up more time, and established a lesson routine that worked within the family's limitations. 3 times a week, in the late afternoon, he went to the small house in Lincoln Heights. Margaret always made coffee. Linda watched the lessons from a distance, and Timothy absorbed musical knowledge at a pace that amazed everyone. Within a month, the boy had mastered techniques that took years to learn. Not just techniques, he was also developing his own style, a unique way of interpreting music that was entirely his own. "How do you do that?" Michael asked one afternoon after Timothy played his own version of a classical piece. "I can't really explain it," Timothy replied, focused on the strings. "It's like the music tells me what it wants to be. The music talks to you, not with words, but I can feel what it's feeling. If it's sad, happy, angry, or longing, then I play it the way it's asking." Michael fell silent, processing the answer. This wasn't just technical talent, it was a kind of musical synesthesia, an almost supernatural ability to connect emotionally with music. Linda, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, stepped closer. "He's always been like this. When he was a baby, he'd stop crying when he heard music. When he learned to walk, he danced before he could even speak properly. And you never thought to nurture that? How? With what money? With what time?" Linda sat beside her son, Our life has always been about survival. There was no luxury of thinking about talents. Michael understood. For families like Timothy's, talent was a luxury they couldn't afford to cultivate. Work, school, and securing the basics came first. Dreams were for those with full stomachs and a roof over their heads. But now he can, Michael said. Now Timothy has the chance to develop this gift. As long as it doesn't interfere with his normal life, Linda insisted. Of course. In the following weeks, Michael had an idea. Timothy needed more than private lessons. He needed to experience music in a group, to understand how it worked as a social language. Linda, can I take Timothy to meet other musicians? What kind of musicians? There's a group here in town that meets Saturdays at the square. They're amateur musicians, people who play for fun. I thought it'd be good for him to see that music isn't just a profession, it's also community. Linda thought for a moment. Can I come too? Of course. Margaret's invited as well. The following Saturday, the four of them walked to the town square, where they found about 15 people of all ages gathered in an informal circle. There were guitars, ukuleles, an accordion, and a tambourine. It was pure Southern folk music at its finest. Reinforcements have arrived, one of the musicians called when he spotted Michael. Did you bring your guitar? I did, and I brought a special friend. Michael introduced Timothy to the group. The boy was shy, hiding behind his mother, but his eyes sparkled as he watched the instruments. This is Timmy, Michael explained. He's been learning guitar with me. Want to play with us, son? Asked Mrs. Thompson, a 60-year-old woman who played the accordion like no one else. Timothy glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Can I? Of course you can. Timothy took his borrowed guitar and joined the circle. At first he just followed the other musicians, playing simple chords, but as he relaxed he began to improvise, crafting melodic counterpoints that harmonized perfectly with the group's music. Before long the other musicians were stopping to listen to what the boy was creating. Timothy wasn't just playing along, he was raising the musical level of the entire group. Good heavens, boy, murmured Mr. Jenkins, an experienced guitarist. Where did you learn to play like that? From Mr. Harrison. Michael, congratulations. You've discovered a real talent. Linda watched with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was proud to see her son shine. On the other, she feared all that admiration might go to his head. Margaret, sensing her daughter's conflict, stepped closer. See? He's happy, but he's still the same boy. The music hasn't changed who he is. It just revealed who he's always been. The music session lasted 3 hours. When it ended, several musicians approached Timothy to congratulate him and encourage him to keep playing. You have a special gift, son, said Mrs. Thompson. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. On the way home, Timothy was beaming. Mom, did you see they liked my music? I did, honey, and I was so proud. Can I come back next week? Linda looked at Michael, who nodded discreetly. Yes, you can. That night, after Timothy went to bed, Linda talked with Michael on the porch. I need to admit something. I'm starting to understand why you insisted so much on teaching my son music. Why? Because he's whole when he's playing. It's like all his pieces fall into place. Michael smiled. Exactly. Music isn't just what Timothy does. It's who he is. But I'm still afraid. Of what? That he'll grow up thinking the world will welcome him with open arms just because he plays well. The world is cruel to people like us. That's why it's important he learns music the right way, not as an escape from reality, but as a tool to face it. Linda was silent for a moment. Michael, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why are you doing this? What's your real interest in my son? The question caught Michael off guard. He thought for a long moment before answering. You know, Linda, I started playing guitar for the same reasons as Timothy. I wanted to bring joy to my family, especially my mother, who was always sad. And did you? I did. But in the process, I lost something important. I lost the purity, the genuine passion. Music became work, obligation, ego. Watching Timothy play, I I remember why I started. He gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What? The love of music. Timothy doesn't play to impress anyone. He plays because he needs to, because the music flows naturally from him. That's rare, Linda. That's precious. Linda nodded, finally understanding. So you're learning from him too, more than I'm teaching. From that conversation on, the relationship between Michael and Timothy's family changed completely. Linda stopped seeing the musician as a threat and began to view him as an ally in her son's upbringing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The lessons intensified. Michael began teaching more advanced music theory, composition, and arrangements. Timothy absorbed everything with impressive ease, but always kept his unique musical personality. One day, Michael arrived with a different proposal. Timmy, how about we record one of your compositions? Record how? I have portable equipment at the hotel. We can make a home recording just so you have a record of your music. Timothy loved the idea. They chose a piece he'd written inspired by his family's story, a melancholy yet hopeful melody about people who leave and people who stay. The recording was done right there in the living room. Michael brought basic equipment, and Timothy played his composition with a deeply emotional interpretation. When they heard the result, everyone was moved. The music, even recorded in homemade conditions, had an extraordinary emotional quality. "This is incredible," Margaret remarked, wiping away a tear. "It's your music, Timmy," Linda said proudly. "You created this." Timothy seemed unable to believe that such a beautiful piece had come from his own hands. "Can I make more?" "As many as you want," Michael replied. Over the following weeks, they recorded several of Timothy's compositions. Each one revealed a different facet of the boy's talent. There were joyful, melancholic, reflective, and hopeful pieces, a complete musical universe blossoming from the mind of a 12-year-old. Michael made copies of the recordings and gave one to the family to keep, but he also took a copy with him, with an idea in mind. Back in New York City a few days later, Michael played the recordings for some fellow musicians. The reaction was unanimous. Timothy was an exceptional talent. "Michael, where did you find this boy?" asked Jessica, a respected music producer. "In Nashville. He's 12. 12? Jessica couldn't believe it. "These compositions are too sophisticated for a child." "That's exactly what makes Timothy special. He doesn't compose like a child. He composes like a born musician." "Did you bring him to New York?" "No, and I don't plan to. He has a family, a life in Nashville. I'm teaching him music right there." Jessica grew thoughtful. "You know, Michael, I know some people who'd love to hear these compositions. Songwriters, producers, even some singers looking for new material." "For what purpose?" "To recognize his talent, maybe open some doors for the future." Michael hesitated. He remembered his promise to Linda not to create unrealistic expectations for Timothy. "Jessica, I need to be honest with you. The boy's family has reservations about a music career. I promised I'd teach him music for the love of art, not professional ambition." "I understand, but recognition isn't necessarily the same as career pressure. Sometimes it's just appreciating talent." Michael promised to think about it and returned to Nashville with his head full of possibilities. But he decided not to mention anything to Timothy or his family for now. Back to their lessons, Michael noticed Timothy was going through a phase of rapid development. His compositions were more complex, his interpretations more mature. The boy was evolving too quickly. "Timmy, have you been writing new music?" "Yes, I have. Want to hear?" Timothy played a composition that left Michael speechless. It was a complex instrumental piece, with sophisticated harmonic changes and elaborate thematic development. This wasn't a child's music. It was the work of an experienced composer. "How did you create this?" "I was thinking about the story Grandma Margaret told about her great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War. Then I imagined what the music of that time would sound like, but mixed with today's music." Michael shook his head, impressed. Timothy wasn't just writing songs. He was creating musical concepts, developing complex thematic ideas. Timothy, have you ever thought about studying music formally? What do you mean? Conservatory, music school, specialized teachers? Timothy thought for a moment. I like learning from you. Why would I need other teachers? Because you're growing faster than I can keep up. Soon you'll need knowledge I don't have. The idea worried Timothy. Does that mean you won't teach me anymore? No, it means you might need extra lessons. With me and with other teachers too. But would those other teachers be here in Nashville? Michael hesitated. That was exactly the question he feared. Some yes, others might be in bigger cities. Timothy stayed silent, nervously fidgeting with the guitar strings. I don't want to leave home, Mr. Harrison. I don't want to leave my mom and grandma. And you don't have to. I'm just thinking about possibilities for the future. But the seed of worry had already been planted in Timothy's mind. That night, he talked to his mother. Mom, Mr. Harrison said I might need other teachers. Linda, who was preparing dinner, stopped what she was doing. What kind of teachers? He didn't explain it well, but he said some might be in other cities. Linda's heart froze. It was exactly what she had always feared. Timothy's talent growing to the point where he'd need opportunities that only existed far from home. And you? What do you think about it? I don't want to go. I want to learn music, but I want to stay here with y'all. Linda hugged her son, but her mind was in turmoil. Had the time come to make a difficult decision? The next day, she went to see Michael. We need to talk. Of course. About what? About Timothy's future. About those other teachers you mentioned. Michael realized he'd made a mistake by talking to Timothy before discussing it with the family. Linda, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just think Timothy's talent is growing too fast. And the solution is to send him away? Not necessarily, there are other possibilities. Like what? Michael took a deep breath. It was time to reveal the idea he'd been nurturing. What if we brought the teachers to him? What do you mean? There's a possibility of creating a music education program right here in Nashville, specialized teachers who'd come periodically to give lessons to Timothy and other talented kids in the area. Linda was surprised. Is that possible? With support and organization, yes. There are social programs that fund projects like this. But why would anyone do that for my son? Because talents like Timothy's come along rarely. And when they do, they deserve to be nurtured the best way possible. Linda sat down, processing the information. That would mean he wouldn't have to leave home. Exactly. He could get high-level music education without leaving his family. And what would your role be in all this? I'd be the program coordinator. I'd still be Timothy's main teacher, but I'd bring in other specialists to complement his education. The idea was tempting, but Linda still had doubts. Michael, isn't this a little too grand? Creating a whole program because of one child. It wouldn't just be for Timothy. It'd be for all the talented kids around here who don't have opportunities. Timothy would be the pilot, but the program would benefit many others. Linda stayed silent for a long time. I need to think and talk to my mother and Timothy. Of course. But I want you to know I'm not proposing this out of pressure or haste. I'm proposing it because I believe it's the best way to develop Timothy's talent without disrupting the family's stability. That night, Timothy's family had a long conversation. Margaret, as always, was the voice of wisdom. Linda, this might be the opportunity we've been waiting for. A way to give Timmy what he deserves without losing him. But what if it doesn't work? What if it's just a disguised way to prepare him to leave here? Then we stop. Simple as that. Timothy, who had listened to the whole conversation, finally spoke. Mom, I want to try, but only if you really agree. I don't want you worrying because of me. Linda looked at her son, seeing a maturity in him that surprised her. All right, let's try. Over the following weeks, Michael began working to make the project a reality. He reached out to educational organizations, cultural funding agencies, musicians and teachers willing to collaborate. The response was better than he expected. Many people were interested in the idea of a decentralized music education program that would bring quality instruction to rural towns. Jessica, the producer who had heard Timothy's recordings, offered initial financial support. Other musicians volunteered to teach. A university provided technical and pedagogical assistance. Within 2 months, the project was structured. It would be called Music for All and would launch as a pilot program in Nashville, with the possibility of expanding to other cities. Timothy would be the first official student, but the program was open to other children in the region who showed musical talent. "Timmy," Michael said on the day of the program's official launch, "you know all this started because of you, right? Because of me. Your talent inspired others to believe it's worth investing in music education. You're not just a beneficiary of the program, you're a co-founder." Timothy smiled but seemed more interested in playing than formalities. "Can I meet the other teachers?" "Of course." The program began with 5 specialist teachers who came once a month to give intensive lessons. Besides Timothy, 6 other boys and girls from the region were selected to participate. Timothy quickly stood out, not only as the most advanced student, but also as a natural leader. He helped the younger students, shared his musical discoveries, and created arrangements for the group to play together. "He has a gift for teaching," remarked Professor Sarah, a specialist in music pedagogy. "Maybe we should nurture that too." The idea of Timothy as a music educator had never occurred to Michael, but it made sense. The boy had a knack for explaining complex concepts simply, patience with beginners, and the ability to motivate others by example. "Timothy, would you like to help teach the younger students?" "Can I?" "Of course, you'd be like a teaching assistant." From that moment on, Timothy took on a dual role in the program: advanced student and teaching assistant. The experience revealed a new facet of his talent. Teaching music forced him to articulate knowledge that had been intuitive, deepening his own musical understanding and accelerating his development even further. 6 months after the program began, Timothy not only mastered advanced guitar techniques, but had also become a skilled young music educator. "Michael," Linda said one afternoon, "I need to admit something." "What is it?" "I was wrong. Music didn't take my son away. It brought the world to him, it was true. The program had transformed not just Timothy, but the entire cultural dynamic of Nashville. Concerts, workshops, and performances were now regular events. The town was becoming a hub for music education. "And you know what else?" Linda continued. "Timothy is more connected to the family now than before. Teaching music made him appreciate the people he loves even more." Michael smiled. The project had succeeded beyond his most optimistic expectations, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. A year after the program began, during a public student performance, a man in the audience caught Margaret's attention. "Isn't that?" Margaret followed her friend's gaze and felt her heart stop. At the back of the auditorium, leaning quietly against the wall, was Robert, Timothy's father. He looked older, with graying hair and a weary expression, but it was unmistakably him. Margaret discreetly touched Linda's arm, pointing toward the man. Linda looked and paled. "It's him," she whispered. "What do we do?" "Not right now. Timothy is performing." On stage, Timothy was playing one of his newest compositions, a piece that told the musical story of his family. He hadn't seen his father in the audience. He was completely focused on the music. Robert watched his son play with an expression of shock and pride. It was clear he hadn't expected Timothy to be so musically advanced. When the performance ended, Robert started heading for the exit, but Margaret intercepted him. "Robert." He stopped, recognizing his mother-in-law. "Mrs. Thompson." "You're leaving without talking to him?" Robert lowered his eyes. "I don't have the right. I abandoned all of you. You have a father's right, and he has the right to know you. Linda will never forgive me." Linda has grown a lot over the years, and Timothy deserves a conversation with his father. Robert hesitated, clearly torn between the desire to reconnect with his son and the shame of his abandonment. "I don't know what to say to him." "Start by apologizing. We'll figure out the rest." Meanwhile, Timothy had stepped off the stage and was looking for his family in the audience. When he saw his grandmother talking to a stranger, he approached. "Grandma, who is this man?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Timothy, this is your father." The boy stopped, studying Robert carefully. There was an obvious physical resemblance, but Timothy showed no immediate emotional recognition. "My father?" "Yes," Robert said, his voice thick. "Hi, son." Timothy stared at him for a long moment. "Are you a musician too?" The question caught Robert off guard. "I was. Not so much now." "Why did you stop?" Because I realized music alone doesn't mean anything. It only matters when you have people to share it with." Timothy nodded, as if the answer made sense. "Want to see my guitar?" "I'd love to." Linda approached the group, tense, but composed. "Robert." "Linda, you look beautiful." "Thank you." An awkward silence settled between the adults, but Timothy seemed oblivious to the tension. "Dad, do you know how to play Country Roads?" "It's the first song I ever learned." "I do." "Want to play it with me?" Robert glanced at Linda, who gave a slight nod. "I'd like that." Timothy ran off to borrow guitars, leaving the adults alone. "Linda, I know I have no right to ask for anything. You're right, you don't. But I wanted to explain." "Now, you don't need to explain anything, Robert. What's done is done. The question now is what you want with Timothy." "I want to know my son. I want to try to make up for lost time." "No promises you can't keep." "No promises I can't keep." Timothy returned with the guitars, still unaware of the emotional complexity of the situation. "Ready, let's play." Father and son sat side by side and began playing Country Roads. Robert played simply, traditionally. Timothy added sophisticated harmonic variations that enriched the melody without losing its essence. "Wow," Robert murmured. "You play so much better than I ever did." "Mr. Harrison taught me. He's the best teacher in the world." Robert looked around for the mentioned teacher. "Where is he?" "Over there." Timothy pointed to Michael, who was watching from a distance. Robert stood and walked over to the famous musician. "You must be Michael." "I am." "And you must be Timothy's father." "I am. And I want to thank you." "For what?" "For taking better care of my son than I did." Michael extended his hand. "I just gave him opportunities. It was his mother and grandmother who really took care of him. I know, and I know I don't deserve to be here." "That's for Timothy to decide." The two men watched the boy, who had started playing alone again, lost in his own music. "He's special, isn't he?" Robert remarked. "Very. Maybe the most talented musician I've ever met." "Does he have a future?" "He has whatever future he chooses. With the right support, he can go as far as he wants." Robert nodded, seeming to finally understand the magnitude of what he had lost. Can I visit him sometimes?" Michael looked at Linda, who had approached the group. "That's his mother's decision." Linda was silent for a moment. "You can visit, but don't give him false hopes. And don't interfere with the music education he's receiving." "Understood." "And one more thing," she added. "If you ever decide to leave again, say goodbye first. Don't just disappear." "I promise." From that day on, Robert began making occasional visits. He didn't try to take on the role of the father he had abandoned, but instead worked to build a new relationship with Timothy, based on the present rather than the past. Timothy, in turn, welcomed his father with the emotional maturity that characterized his relationship with music. No resentment, but no illusions either. "Dad," he said during one visit, "why did you leave when I was little?" "Because I thought music was more important than family. I made a huge mistake. And now? Now I know music only makes sense when you have family to share it with." "That's why I don't want to leave here," Timothy remarked. "My music is good because I have you all." The words struck Robert deeply, and he finally understood the lesson his son had learned. Talent without love is empty, and music without family is just noise. Months passed, and the Music for All program continued to grow. Timothy developed not just as a musician, but as a person. By 13, he was teaching younger children and performing at regional events. But perhaps his greatest achievement was personal. He had managed something his father never could, balancing his love for music with his love for family. One afternoon, during a lesson, Michael made an unexpected proposal. "Timothy, how about we record an album of your compositions? A real album, a real one, to sell so people can hear your music." Timothy was excited but soon worried. "This won't make me famous and force me to leave, will it?" Michael laughed. "Not necessarily. We can record right here, release it locally first, and see how it goes. And if people really like it, then we'll talk with your family and decide what to do." The idea of recording an album thrilled the whole family. Margaret suggested including some traditional Southern songs interpreted in Timothy's style. "It'd be a way to show that new and old music can coexist," she explained. Linda, who had become her son's biggest supporter, offered their home for the recordings. That way, Timothy can feel comfortable in his own space. The recording took 2 weeks. Timothy recorded 10 original compositions and 5 reimagined regional classics. The result was an album that was both innovative and traditional, youthful and mature. "Homegrown Music," Timothy suggested as the title, because it's music made at home for home with family. The album was first released in Nashville and the surrounding area. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Within a month, every copy had sold out. Record stores in other cities began placing orders, and radio stations added Timothy's songs to their playlists. "Timmy, you're a hit," Michael announced one morning. "A hit how?" "Your album is selling all across the southern region. People love your music." Timothy smiled but didn't seem impressed by his own fame. "Is that good?" "It's very good. It means your music is reaching a lot of people." "And will I have to leave here?" "Not if you don't want to." And Timothy didn't want to. Even as his success grew, he kept his routine. School in the morning, music lessons in the afternoon, family time at night. The success brought invitations to perform in other cities. Timothy would accept some, but always on the condition that he'd return home the same day, or at most, stay overnight once. "Mom," he explained to Linda, "I love playing for people, but I love sleeping in my own bed even more." A year after the album's release, Timothy had become known throughout the southern region as the music prodigy boy. But he remained the same simple kid, devoted to his family, passionate about music. "Michael," Linda said one afternoon, "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your promise. You gave my son the chance to be a musician without stopping him from being a boy. The credit is all his, and yours for believing. And yours for insisting when I didn't want to accept it." Michael smiled, watching Timothy teach guitar to a group of kids from the community. "You know what the real victory is?" he remarked. Timothy didn't become a musician in spite of his family. He became a musician because of his family. It was true. Timothy's talent had flourished precisely because it found fertile ground in love, support, and understanding. 2 years later, at 15, Timothy had already recorded 2 albums, performed hundreds of shows, and taught music to dozens of children. But he still lived in the same house, attended the same school, and held the same values. "Timmy," Michael asked one day, "do you regret anything?" "Like what?" "Not moving to a big city, not trying to be famous nationwide?" Timothy thought for a moment. "No. You know why?" "Why?" "Because I've learned something important. Music isn't about being famous. It's about connecting hearts, and I can do that right from here. And if someday a huge opportunity comes along, then I'll talk to my family and we'll decide together. But whatever choice I make, it'll include them." Michael nodded, proud of the man Timothy was becoming. "You've learned the most important lesson of all." "What's that?" "That talent without character is just skill, but talent with character is transformation." Timothy smiled, picking up his guitar. "Want to hear my new song? I wrote it thinking about all the conversations we've had since day one." "I'd love to." Timothy began playing a melody that told his whole story. A poor boy who dreamed of music, a teacher who believed in him, a family that learned to support dreams without falling apart, a father who returned to ask for forgiveness, a community that discovered the value of art. It was a song both simple and complex, like all good music. It was the song of someone who had learned that true success isn't about reaching a destination, but making the journey worthwhile. When he finished playing, Timothy looked at Michael. "Thank you, Professor." "For what?" "For teaching me that music is the language of the heart, and that our hearts are always at home." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you think Timothy made the right choices? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you all so much for joining us.